Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. It is so good to have you with me on the show this week, this holiday week. So thanks for joining me. I am actually flying solo today. Dr. Kuba is in the midst of managing a crazy winter break at her pedo practice. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity to pull together my list of top 10 for year-end things to do. And I could have done top 20, but I narrowed it down to top 10 and want to just encourage you guys to take some time to think through this top 10 list and hopefully apply several of them to your life over the next couple of weeks as we approach year end. Now, before I get into our topic today, though, I first of all want to just thank all of our listeners. Dr. Kuba and I have been blown away by the amount of listeners and followers and downloaders that we have out there. The numbers are really just staggering, and we are so glad that you are enjoying the show and sticking with us and being a part of it. Now, we know the numbers, but unfortunately, the dental community does not know how many people listen to our show. So I just want to encourage you guys, if you haven't taken the time to rate, review the podcast, we would love for the dental community to know that you're listening, that you're enjoying the show, and that you would recommend it. So take a moment, especially on Apple, and just rate and review the podcast for us if you haven't done so already. All right, let's dive into the top 10 for year end. I am going to start with one of the things that has been so prevalent in 2021 for me as I've been meeting with clients, and that is making sure that you take time right now, if you haven't done so already, to stop and evaluate your own health. I have had so many people just overwhelmed with stress, anxiety. It's having physical manifestations with so many of my clients. And I think we're still living in the wake of the stress that the pandemic has brought and continues to bring to our lives. And so I want you to pause, hit the pause button, and evaluate your health. How are you doing mentally? How are you doing spiritually? How are you doing physically? What are things that are weighing you down? And really evaluate how you can lighten the load. You cannot do this alone. So after you've taken the time to evaluate yourself, if you give yourself a 10 out of 10 and you're just doing great, that's fantastic. If you feel like you're struggling even in a couple of areas, I would encourage you to reach out and get some support either from a colleague, a family member, a life partner, and make sure that you talk through your overall emotional and mental health. This is just way more critical. It's always been critical in the dental field, but I've been so surprised to see just how critical it is this year. So number one is evaluate your health. Number two, take some time to reflect on your practice. Most practices have experienced a wealth of changes in the last year and a half or 2 years. And many clients of mine have just kind of put their nose to the grindstone and they have just kept on plowing forward. And so if you haven't taken the time to really pause and reflect to pre-pandemic practice and post-pandemic practice, try to really think about what's changed in your practice. Are you still staying on point with your why and why you practice dentistry and why you even own a business? Is what you love about the dental field and your practice, is that continuing in your practice, or are you struggling to really keep the joy alive? So reflect on your practice and try to pinpoint what exactly has changed, and then see if we can get it back on track, or if you can adapt to these new changes once you've kind of mentally wrestled with the fact that these are staying. So, number 2, reflect on your practice, especially related to your why. If you want more details on your why, go back to our previous episode. We've got a full hour on your why. So, feel free to go back and listen to that episode. Number 3, consider your team. So, again, this is prevalent across all of my dental clients. I haven't had one that hasn't had some type of staffing change in the last year. I want you to pause and consider your team. Think through each individual team member. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Do you feel like they are satisfied in their role at your practice? Do you feel like there are goals and dreams that they have that they're not achieving? And is there anything that you can do to support them? When's the last time you had a one-on-one with your team member, each individual team member? And what can you do to get that on the books? Do you feel like your team is connected to one another? Does it feel like a happy workplace environment? And then another thing to consider that's a little bit tricky, and nobody's going to like this suggestion, is you need to really think about if you are financially competitive with this current job market. So what are you currently paying? And if you haven't asked around, you need to ask around with your other colleagues that are in your area to see what they're paying. Are you competitive or are you not competitive? Also, look at your full package of things that you offer. If it is just pay, you really need to work to have a better looking package for even your existing staff. If they've stayed with you through all of this, it's time to really work to keep your team and to keep everybody happy. So consider your team is number 3. Number 4, I want you to take time over these next couple of weeks to really think about 2021. And if you were to pick the wins of 2021, what were the times that you're just like, wow, we were really successful, or I felt really good about fill in the blank? What were your wins? That can be personal wins, that can be professional wins from the practice, but what were the things that you feel like were your successes of 2021? And try to get really specific with those. One of the great things about listing your wins or your successes, whatever you want to call it, from the year, is that if you haven't thought about your why, or you think you know your why or your purpose, your motivation, listing out what you think are your successes really helps you to hone in on your why. So I definitely want you to think about your best moments of 2021. Then, as you might expect, next on the list is listing your losses from 2021. So this is important because we have to grapple with the fact that we're not going to win everything. We're not going to hit everything that we swing at, and it's okay. We don't have to have 100% successes. We are going to have losses. And as we think about that from 2021, that could have been a staff member that you lost that you really feel like you could have kept on the team if you tried a little bit harder. That could have been a loss of a part of your practice. Maybe that was a certain subset of patients that left for some reason or another. Maybe that was just a loss in production. You just went down this year for some reason. Or it could be the opposite. Maybe you went up in production, but you lost some of that quality time with your patients, and that felt like a loss to you. So think through, what were your wins of 2021 and what were your losses? And again, I would encourage you to think about this on a personal level as well. So think about your wins, think about your losses. Number 6 on the list will tie into wins and losses, but it's a little bit different. I want you to pick your top 3 most memorable moments of 2021. This is really hard to do. It sounds simple, but it's the times where you think back and you go, what stood out to me this year? What felt good in the moment? What were these moments where it just hit me that I'm grateful for life? So these may be very subtle things. They don't have to be, oh, wow, I finally got to take a, trip to Hawaii and I've always wanted to do that. It doesn't have to be that, although it can be. But it can be just moments where, life felt right to you. What were these 3 moments? So the reason that I like for you to limit it to 3 is because we can really kind of drown in a lot of memorable moments, both good and bad. And by limiting yourself to 3, you pick the 3 that matter to you the most, either professionally or personally. And so I want you to really think on these moments of impact in your life. Again, this ties into your why. This will potentially tie into your wins and losses of 2021. But I want you to just have a moment of reflection where you think about memorable. And again, it could be good or bad memories, but just your most memorable moments. Number 7. This is where we're going to kind of dive into some of the nitty-gritty for your practice. So I get asked all the time, Bethany, what reports should I be pulling? And it is such a long list of reports that I feel like I could recommend that I want to kind of narrow down this list for you guys from a year-end perspective. Things that I would love to pull for my clients when I get in towards the end of the year. Things that I have been pulling, actually. So I would obviously encourage you to look at your production and collection for the year. I would imagine that most of you are doing that, but if you haven't, it's time to do it. Look at your production, look at your collection, compare production and collection to, if you have a 3-year-old practice, compare it to 2020 and compare it to 2019. This has changed slightly for me because in previous years, I would say always just compare it to the year before. Unfortunately, the year before right now is 2020, and that is such a random and strange year that it's really not a good comparison. It's not comparing apples to apples. So I want you to compare the 2 previous years and see what trends you spot in production collection. I also want you to pull your new patients for the year for 2021 and compare that against 2020 and 2019. Are you up? Are you down? And you could even, depending upon your software, look through the list of your new patients and see who they are. See if you recognize them. Were they good patients? Were they difficult new patients? Kind of qualitatively decide how good they were for your practice. You also want to look at provider productivity. So one of my favorite reports to pull in any software is how productive is the provider per patient. So let's say you are the only provider in your practice, so it's just you, the doctor. Then compare your productivity per patient or per visit. Some softwares pull it per visit. Compare that to 2020 and 2019. So you'll pull that for 2021 and then compare to the previous years. Now, if you have multiple providers in your office, then you're going to want to pull this for each individual provider. One of the things that you're looking for is you want to see that you're growing in productivity per visit or per patient. Sometimes, especially in a year like 2021, when we're doing a lot of recovery from the crazy 2020 year, what happens is we get busy. We get very busy in our practice, but we don't get productive. So it could be that when you look at your provider productivity or your production per visit, you see that, wow, I saw 500 more patients this year in 2021 than I did last year in 2020. And then your eyes kind of span up to that production number and you go, but how did I produce the same amount as 2020? Well, that all depends on how productive per visit or per patient you were. And so if your provider productivity is trending down, either for you, the individual provider in your practice, or all of your providers, then it begs the question, what's happening? Why is our productivity going down per visit? And then you really have to kind of dig into what's happening. One of the other things for those of you who have multiple providers in your practice, either associates or hygienists, if you're a general or perio practice, you will want to look at the weight that each provider carries. So let's say you've got 2 full-time dentists or orthodontist or whatever you have in your practice. You want to look at, are they carrying the same weight, or is one of them more heavily weighted than the other? Why is this helpful information to know? Well, first of all, it helps you to potentially identify an underproducer, or it may point you to scheduling inefficiencies. It may be that we just naturally weight a certain provider more heavily, and that's not intentional and that's not even preferred, but the team just kind of assumes that certain procedures or certain types of patients go with a particular provider. So this will give you some insight into how is it being weighted and what can you do about it. Now, if you've got a hygienist or a hygiene department, then again, you want to make sure that your hygiene department is carrying enough weight in the production for your practice that it makes sense. So you, again, want to look at their productivity and see how that's trending over the last few years. Now, if you pull these reports and all numbers are up and everything looks good, then there's really no need to dive in further. However, if you start to look and you're like, why is everything down, or why are some numbers down? One additional report that you can pull is a summary or an audit of your adjustments. Oftentimes, a practice can unintentionally lose productivity or lose collections because we are writing off more. This is a trend that I'm seeing in a lot of practices, and it is due to a lot of insurance changes. So I would encourage you to, if your numbers all look great, you don't have to take this additional step. If numbers are not what they used to be, then I would dive into really considering the adjustments that are taking place. Is your team adjusting off more of the production due to insurance changes? And you may not know that it's due to insurance changes. I can tell you that it's likely due to insurance changes and your team not knowing how to handle those insurance changes. So if your adjustments are up, and production may be up, but collections may be down, I would encourage you to look more deeply into your adjustments. So those would be some really great reports to pull for your practice and evaluate. That's number 7 on the list. And I know that's a nitty gritty one. I'll try to get back to some fun ones here. So number 8, I would love for you to dream about your hopes for 2022. This is natural at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year, so I don't want it to feel like you're making a list of things that you want to accomplish or goals or anything like that. I just want you to sit back and dream a little bit. What would next year look like? How would you duplicate more of those wins? How would you lower the risk of those losses? What would your team look like? What would your personal life look like? Just take a minute to really have fun and dream about your hopes for 2022. Heck, you can even get a little crazy with it and dream about things that you feel like would not practically happen in 2022, but just dream about it. It's nice to have dreams for the next year, but number 9 on my list is I want you to fast forward beyond 2022, and I want you to go forward 5 years in your mind. So 5 years from now, what do you want life to look like? And think through specifics. Make a list of these things. What are your dreams and your hopes for 5 years from now? It feels different than your hopes and dreams for next year, right? 5 years gives us a little bit of luxury to play around with our hopes and our dreams and our desires. But it also gives us a vision of what we're aiming for, even if we haven't truly thought about it. So 5 years from now, and again, this depends on where you are in your life, where you are in your practice. You may be fast forwarding 5 years from now and going, you know what? I would love to add an associate. I would love to have another hygienist. I would love to be able to take so much more time off work. It would be so nice if I was able to take off spring break with my kids and a week in the summertime and maybe even a couple weeks at Christmas. And I can kind of envision myself of places that I would be going and traveling. So that may be a version because of the stage of life that you're in and the stage that your practice is in. It could be that you're at a stage where you go, 5 years from now, I would love to be slowing down. I would love to slow my practice down. I would love to have enough retirement that I'm able to start thinking about that or maybe even planning for that. So that could very well be where you are. There's going to be a million different ways, depending upon people's scenarios, that they might envision 5 years from now. But just sit back and think about it and then write some of those things down so that you know, this is what I'm aiming for. This is what I'm hoping for. So now, what can I do today to start making that dream become a reality? All right, I loaded you down with 9 really intense things to do. So I want to encourage you with this last one. Number 10 on my list is you've got to take time, no matter what your specialty is. I know this is hard for pedo offices. This is hard for ortho offices. It's often hard even for just a general family practice. But it's critically important that you take time to rest. It is such a mental beatdown to get to the end of the year and to just fast forward directly into another intense year. So find some time over the next 2 or 3 weeks to mentally, physically rest. Rest is going to look different for every single person. Some people, they want to literally lay in their bed and sleep and eat and sleep and eat. And if that's your version of rest, find time to do it. And not just an afternoon. Find a couple days. Rest, recharge, rejuvenate. Maybe for some people, rest is reading books and filling their mind with lots of ideas. Maybe even, jumping on and doing some online education. Maybe education feels like rest to you. It re-energizes you, revives you. Then do it. Maybe rest is traveling and it's time to do that. I don't know what your version of rest looks like, but it's so important, and this ties back to number 1, that you rest for the sake of your own health, for the sake of your own mental, physical, and emotional stability. Rest. That's my top 10 list. I'm going to run through it one more time. I know I've got list makers out there that are dying because they missed one. So I'm going to run back through it one more time. Number 1, evaluate your health. Number 2, reflect on the practice, specifically associated to your why. Number 3, consider your team. Number 4, list your wins or your successes from 2021. Number 5, list your losses from 2021. Number 6, pick your top 3 most memorable moments of 2021. Number 7, dive into those reports, evaluate, think about those. Number 8, dream about your hopes for 2022. Have some fun with it. And then number 9, fast forward 5 years from now, and what do you want life to look like? Number 10, rest. I hope this podcast has been helpful for you guys today. I know it's not near as fun without my awesome co-host, Dr. Kuba, but I wanted to leave you guys with some practical tips to finish out 2021. Dr. Kuba and I will both be off next week, enjoying our families and the wonderful holiday. I hope you'll take time off as well, and we will see you guys in the new year. Don't forget to leave those reviews and rate us on Apple. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.